Have you ever wondered what keeps a married man awake at night, staring at the ceiling while his wife sleeps beside him? It's not always money, infidelity, or the stress of daily responsibilities. There's a deeper fear, a hidden truth he will never put into words, not to his friends, not to his partner, sometimes not even to himself. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious always reveals what the conscious mind tries so hard to bury. Behind every confident smile, behind the routine of family life, there lies an unspoken terror that silently shapes his choices, his desires, and even his failures. This fear is not about losing love or respect. It's something far more primal, something he desperately hides under layers of masculinity and social expectation. Once you understand it, you'll never look at married men the same way again. The question is, are you ready to face the secret fear they will never admit? The hidden battle inside him. Inside every married man, there is a silent, almost invisible space where battles are fought that no one around him can see. He may be smiling, fulfilling his duties, being the present husband and the responsible father, yet deep within him a constant struggle takes place. Jung described this clash as the tension between the social self, the persona, and what truly inhabits the unconscious, filled with desires, fears, and truths that don't fit into the role of family man. This battle is not fought with swords or bullets, but with thoughts that rise in silence, with feelings he cannot share, and with questions that seem too dangerous to ever say out loud. When a man marries, society expects firmness, stability, and strength. His family sees him as a safe harbor. His friends see him as someone who has it all figured out. But behind that solid image lies a heart that still feels doubts, insecurities, and an inner voice that whispers, "What if I'm not enough?" That is the hidden battle, staying strong on the outside while struggling with the fragility he tries so hard to conceal. The weight of this fight grows heavier because he finds no place to talk about it. Between responsibilities, work, and family life, there's rarely a moment to expose his vulnerabilities. Many times he himself cannot even name what he feels. Jung believed the unconscious speaks through symbols and signs, and that's exactly how this battle appears. Through insomnia, unexplained irritation, sudden distance, or even dreams that disturb him. The body and mind try to shout something that he refuses to hear, and because he does not give attention to those signals, the tension keeps building. This inner war is not about loving or not loving his partner. It is about the clash between the social role and the inner voice that asks for something more. The unconscious reveals desires for freedom, fear of failure, and a deep need for recognition. These forces collide daily inside him, creating an invisible battlefield. It consumes energy, corrodes peace, and turns even simple moments into scenes of inner conflict. And because he cannot speak about it, the silence itself becomes another weapon against him. And this is where the secret fear emerges. It's not just the fear of failing in marriage or disappointing his family. It's the fear of losing his very identity while trying to meet every external expectation. It's the dread that by being the ideal husband, he is suffocating parts of himself that still cry out to live. This feeling places him before choices he doesn't want to face, to keep wearing the armor of the persona, or to look straight into his shadow, the unconscious part that holds the truths he denies. Jung said that ignoring the shadow only makes it stronger, and for a married man, that shadow often carries exactly what he fears most. When the battle intensifies, subtle signs appear. The distant gaze, the long silence, the deep sigh no one understands. These small gestures are messages from the unconscious mind, revealing that something is out of balance. The married man, even surrounded by love and security, carries within him this ongoing fight, often unaware of how deeply it shapes his actions. He may work harder or withdraw emotionally, or seek distractions, not realizing these behaviors are shields to cover the tension within. At its core, this silent struggle is the starting point to understand the fear he will never admit. Because the true terror is not losing his wife, his job, or social respect. It is losing himself in the process of playing a role that society demands. He fears waking up one day and realizing that he has lived years performing a character, while his authentic self remained locked away. That is why the hidden battle inside him matters so much. It is not just psychological, it is existential. This battle reveals the paradox of marriage, the desire to belong and be secure, and the simultaneous need to remain free and whole. To the outside world, he is stable, confident, dependable. Inside, however, he wrestles with the possibility that his real self may never fully come to light. And that is the war no one sees. The war that defines the secret fear married men will never admit. The weight of silent expectations. Every married man carries invisible weights on his shoulders, weights that cannot be measured in numbers or seen with the naked eye. They are the expectations that surround him from the moment he says, "I do." Some of these expectations are spoken out loud: to provide, to protect, to stay faithful, to be reliable. Others, however, are never spoken, and yet they press down on him with even greater force. These silent expectations are the ones that quietly shape his every action, even when he doesn't realize it. Jung often reminded us that much of human behavior is driven not by conscious thought, but by the unconscious patterns we inherit and absorb from culture. A married man doesn't need to be told daily that he should never show weakness. It is already embedded in him by the collective shadow of society. He doesn't need anyone to say he must always be in control. The message has already been whispered into his unconscious since childhood. These unspoken rules become chains, tying him to an ideal image he struggles to maintain. The weight grows heavier because it cannot be discussed openly. How can he tell his partner that sometimes he feels like collapsing under the pressure to always be enough? How can he admit to his friends that the role of strong provider feels like a cage? He doesn't. Instead, he internalizes these expectations, locking them away in the unconscious, where they slowly transform into anxiety, frustration, or emotional distance. Silent expectations are powerful because they do not announce themselves. They simply exist, pressing down on him, shaping how he behaves at home, at work, and in his inner life. These expectations show up in small, everyday situations. When he hesitates to share his real opinion because he fears conflict. When he stays longer at work because he believes providing more money proves his worth. When he keeps his sadness hidden because he believes vulnerability equals weakness. No one tells him directly to do these things, but the weight of silence demands it. The expectations are invisible, but the effects are not. Jung spoke of the persona, the mask we wear to function in society. For the married man, silent expectations create a rigid persona: the reliable husband, the patient father, the steady provider. On the surface, this mask seems noble, but beneath it the man may feel suffocated, trapped in an image that leaves no room for his authentic self. The danger here is that the more he identifies with the mask, the more he loses touch with who he truly is. And the further he drifts from authenticity, the stronger his hidden fear becomes. The cruel reality is that many of these expectations are impossible to fully meet. Life is unpredictable. A man cannot always be strong, always be wise, always be in control. Yet the silent rules of marriage and society tell him he must. That gap, between what he is expected to be and what he can realistically sustain, creates an ongoing tension. This is the weight he cannot put into words, the unspoken demand that gnaws at his sense of self-worth. Sometimes the burden becomes so heavy that it leaks out in passive ways. He may grow irritable over small things, withdraw emotionally, or escape into distractions. These are not failures of love, but symptoms of pressure. They are signs that the unconscious is rebelling against the mask of perfection. The problem is that most people around him don't recognize these signs. They only see the irritation or the distance, not the silent expectations crushing him from within. And so the cycle continues. He hides the weight, no one notices, and the silence grows even louder. Over time, this can erode intimacy, because how can someone truly be close when part of him is locked away? How can a relationship flourish if his authentic fears and struggles are buried under the pressure to perform? At the core, the weight of silent expectations reveals the secret fear, the fear of disappointing everyone. Not just his wife, not just his family, but himself. The fear that no matter how hard he tries, he will fall short of the impossible standards written into the air around him. He may never say these words out loud, but the fear lingers in his unconscious, guiding his choices and shaping his life. The tragedy is that silent expectations are not just external, they become internal. After years of carrying them, a married man doesn't need anyone else to demand perfection. He demands it of himself, and that inner demand born from silence is perhaps the heaviest burden of all. If this video resonated with you and you want to go deeper into Jung's insights, check the link in the pinned comment and discover the Jung Method. It might be exactly the key you've been searching for: the fear of losing himself. One of the deepest struggles a married man faces is not external at all. It is not about work deadlines, financial obligations, or even conflicts at home. It is something far more internal: the fear of losing himself. This is not a fear he easily puts into words because it hides in the unconscious, whispering at night or surfacing in moments of quiet. Jung explained that the greatest danger for any individual is identification, mistaking the mask for the true self. For many men, marriage becomes the place where this identification is strongest, because they begin to confuse their role with their identity. From the outside, he may seem complete. He has a wife, perhaps children, a house, and routines that suggest stability. Yet beneath this surface, there is a silent question: who am I beyond all of this? The fear arises from the possibility that without the role of husband or father, without the duties that define his days, he may not know who he truly is. And that thought terrifies him, because it suggests that the essence of his being could be lost under the weight of roles. This fear often appears in subtle ways. A man may notice that the dreams he once carried are fading. He may realize that the hobbies, passions, or ambitions he once cherished have been abandoned. Slowly, the responsibilities of married life replace them. None of this is wrong on its own. Commitments are part of love and maturity. But the unconscious begins to protest when there is no space left for the self. Jung warned that neglecting the self leads to a sense of emptiness, and that emptiness is often the very thing a man cannot explain to his partner. The paradox is that he may love his wife and his family deeply, and yet still feel this haunting fear. It is not about rejecting them. It is about the tension between being for others and being for himself. When the balance tilts too far toward duty, his individuality begins to dissolve. He becomes the husband, the father, the provider, but no longer simply himself. That loss of self feels like a quiet death, one he hides because it contradicts the image of the strong, satisfied man. The unconscious tries to communicate this fear through symptoms. Restlessness, sudden irritability, or even a longing for escape are always the psyche signals that something important is being forgotten. Sometimes it shows up in daydreams of freedom, fantasies of travel, solitude, or starting over. These are not always literal desires, but symbolic expressions of the self trying to remind him, "I am still here." If he ignores these messages, the fear grows stronger, feeding on the silence he keeps. What makes this fear especially powerful is that it collides with social expectation. A man is praised for sacrificing himself for his family. He is admired for putting others first. And yet deep inside he knows that if he loses touch with his own essence, he cannot fully give love either. Jung believed that true relationship requires individuation, the process of becoming whole within oneself. Without that process, a man risks offering only a hollow version of himself, shaped by roles but empty of authenticity. The fear of losing himself also explains why some men withdraw emotionally. They are not always avoiding their partner. They are often avoiding the reflection of who they have become. Intimacy can be frightening when it threatens to reveal the distance between the outer mask and the inner truth. And so he retreats not because he does not care, but because he cannot face the possibility that the self he once knew is slipping away. At its core, this fear is about identity. Marriage gives structure, but it can also blur boundaries. The man begins to ask silently, "Where do I end and where does my role begin?" Without answers, he fears dissolving completely into responsibility, leaving no space for individuality. And the terror is not just about the present. It is about the future. The haunting thought of looking back decades later and realizing that he lived a life of duty, without ever fully living as himself. This is why the fear of losing himself is so powerful, and why he will rarely admit it. To confess it would sound selfish, even ungrateful, but inside it remains the fear that shapes his choices, his moods, and his secret longings. It is the quiet shadow behind his smile, the hidden voice behind his silence, and until he faces it, this fear continues to guide him from the depths of his unconscious. The shadow of comparison. One of the most relentless forces shaping a married man's inner world is comparison. It is not always open or conscious, but it creeps in quietly like a shadow. He may never say it out loud, yet inside he is constantly measuring himself against other men, against the version of himself he once imagined, even against the silent expectations of his partner. Jung taught that the shadow is everything we refuse to acknowledge, and for many men, comparison belongs to that hidden place. From childhood, boys are conditioned to compete. At school, at work, in sports and relationships, there is always the sense of proving worth. Marriage does not erase this conditioning. It often amplifies it. A man compares his income, his appearance, his achievements, even his marriage itself. Is he as successful as his peers? As admired as others? As desirable as he once was? These questions may never be spoken, but they echo inside him every day. The most dangerous comparisons are not with strangers, but with the man he thought he would become. He may recall the dreams of his youth, the career he imagined, the adventures he promised himself, the life he swore he would build. Now, years into marriage, he sees the gap between that vision and his reality. Sometimes the distance is small, sometimes vast, but the shadow of disappointment grows. It tells him he has failed even if no one else would agree. Comparison also lives inside the relationship itself. He may notice how his wife looks at other men, even in subtle ways, and wonder if he still measures up. He may fear she remembers who he was when they first met and silently compares him to that younger, freer version of himself. This fuels insecurity, and insecurity strengthens the shadow. The truth is that no one needs to criticize him openly. His own unconscious does it constantly. The shadow of comparison shows up in quiet behaviors. He may work longer hours not just to provide, but to prove he is as valuable as others. He may focus on appearance or withdraw when he feels he cannot compete. He may even seek validation outside the marriage, not through infidelity, but through small acts of attention that reassure him he is still enough. These are coping strategies. To silence the shadow, Jung explained that projection is the way we place what we cannot accept about ourselves onto others. In comparison, projection is constant. The man may criticize others for arrogance when in truth he envies their confidence. He may resent his partner for noticing other men, when the real discomfort lies in his own self-doubt. The shadow hides the truth, and instead of facing it, he casts it outward. This deepens the cycle. The fear beneath comparison is simple but devastating. The fear of being less successful, less attractive, less important, less loved. And because society rarely allows men to admit this openly, the fear remains unspoken. The married man smiles, provides, and fulfills his duties, all while battling the terror that he no longer measures up. Not to others, not to himself, not to the image of the man he thought he should be. What makes this shadow destructive is that it never ends. There will always be someone richer, stronger, younger, more accomplished. There will always be a version of himself from the past that seems freer or more alive. The unconscious feeds on these comparisons, keeping him trapped in a loop. No achievement silences it for long, because the shadow is not about reality. It is about perception. Yet within this shadow lies the possibility of growth. Jung believed that by confronting the shadow, by admitting the hidden envy, the disappointment, the quiet fear, a man can begin to integrate it. This does not mean erasing comparison, but understanding it. Recognizing that value is not found in measuring against others, but in becoming whole within himself. The shadow of comparison can destroy, but it can also reveal the truth, that his worth does not depend on competing, but on embracing his authentic self. At its core, the shadow of comparison is another expression of the secret fear married men will never admit. The fear that behind the roles, the duties, and the image of stability, they are not enough. Until it is faced, the shadow will continue to follow, whispering its comparisons into every corner of their lives. The prison of routine. For many married men, life gradually takes on a predictable rhythm. At first, routine feels safe. It provides structure, stability, and a sense of control. But over time, that same structure can transform into a prison, trapping him in cycles that feel endless. Jung warned that when the unconscious is ignored, life becomes mechanical, and routine becomes the mask behind which deeper fears hide. Each day begins to look like the last. Wake up, go to work, come home, handle responsibilities, repeat. There is comfort in this cycle, but there is also suffocation. The man begins to wonder if he is living or merely existing. He may not say this aloud, but deep inside he feels the silent weight of monotony. Routine demands predictability, and predictability quietly strangles spontaneity, the very thing that keeps the spirit alive. This prison is deceptive because it is built from duty and love. Providing for the family, being present, keeping commitments, all of these are noble. Yet when they are repeated without reflection, they become chains. The man begins to feel that he has no choice, that every day is already written. Jung described this as the loss of connection with the self, the deeper part of the psyche that longs for meaning beyond repetition. The danger of routine is not only boredom, it is that the man forgets who he is outside of it. Slowly, his individuality fades into the schedule. He may stop pursuing passions, stop exploring new ideas, stop seeking experiences that once gave him energy. The prison is not locked from the outside. He builds it himself, brick by brick, with every unexamined day. Signs of this prison show up subtly. Irritation over small things, lack of excitement, or even emotional distance. He may not understand why he feels restless because nothing is visibly wrong. On paper, his life is stable, but inside, his unconscious is sending signals. You are trapped. The fear is not just about routine itself. It is about what routine represents. The possibility that his life will pass without true aliveness. This fear is amplified by society's praise of routine. Stability is seen as success. A steady marriage, a consistent career, a reliable presence, all are celebrated. And they should be. But Jung would say that when stability turns into stagnation, the psyche begins to rebel. Dreams may grow darker, filled with images of escape. Thoughts may wander toward freedom, even if he never acts on them. These are not betrayals of love, but messages from within, the self reminding him that he is more than repetition. The prison of routine also affects intimacy. Without freshness, conversations shrink into logistics, bills, chores, schedules. The spark of curiosity fades, replaced by patterns. The man may feel unseen and his partner may feel the same, yet neither speaks it because both are trapped by the same silent cycle. The fear grows not because routine is wrong, but because it erodes the possibility of discovery. Without discovery, the soul starves. To escape this prison, a man must reclaim awareness. It does not require abandoning responsibilities, but awakening within them. Small changes, sharing a new experience with his partner, dedicating time to a forgotten passion, or allowing space for solitude, reopen the door to vitality. Jung believed individuation depends on breaking free from unconscious repetition. Conscious acts, however small, break the walls of monotony. The deeper truth is that routine is not only external, it becomes internal. A man begins to repeat the same thoughts, the same emotions, until his inner world mirrors the monotony of his outer life. He stops asking new questions, and without questions there can be no growth. This is why the prison of routine is so dangerous. It convinces him that nothing is wrong, even while his spirit is starving. At its core, the prison of routine embodies the secret fear he will never admit. The fear of wasting his life. The terror that years will slip away, each day identical to the last, until he looks back and wonders if he truly lived. This fear is rarely spoken, but it guides his restlessness, his distractions, and his longing for something different. It is not a rejection of marriage or love. It is a plea for authenticity, for a life where routine serves him rather than imprisons him. And until he faces this truth, the prison remains locked, built not from iron, but from silence. The secret longing he denies. Behind the responsibilities, the masks and the expectations, every married man carries longings he rarely speaks about. These are not always dramatic desires for another life or another partner. More often they are subtle, human needs. The hunger for freedom, the wish to feel desired again, the longing to explore parts of himself that routine has buried. Jung believed that what we repress does not disappear. It hides in the unconscious, shaping our choices in secret. The longings a man denies become the very forces that influence his behavior the most. On the surface, he may seem content. He has a family, a home, a stable routine. Yet deep inside there is a whisper. Is this all there is? That whisper grows when he feels unrecognized, when his individuality fades into roles, or when the spark of curiosity has dimmed. The longing is not always for someone else. Often it is for himself, for the man he used to be or the man he still dreams of becoming. But because he cannot admit this openly, he denies it, pushing it further into the shadow. These secret longings reveal themselves indirectly. A glance that lingers longer than it should. A fascination with stories of freedom or adventure. A restless energy that seeks escape through work, hobbies, or distractions. Sometimes it is not about wanting to leave marriage, but about wanting to feel alive within it. He may long for moments of passion, for deep conversation, for experiences that break through the monotony. But when these desires are unmet, He convinces himself they do not matter, even though they quietly burn inside him. Jung explained that denial strengthens the shadow. The more a man rejects his longings, the more power they gain in the unconscious. This is why some men suddenly make drastic choices that seem out of character. They are not acting out of nowhere. They are acting from years of denied desires finally breaking through. The unconscious will always find a way to express what the conscious mind refuses to face. What makes these longings so difficult to admit is fear. Fear of judgment, fear of appearing ungrateful, fear of hurting those he loves. A married man may think, I should be satisfied. I have what many others wish for. Why would I want more? And so instead of exploring these longings honestly, he buries them. But buried desires do not die. They wait, shaping his emotions and behaviors from below the surface. The longing he denies may also be for emotional intimacy. Many men grow up believing vulnerability is weakness. In marriage, this belief persists, making it hard for him to say, I need to be seen. I need to be understood. Instead, he hides behind silence, hoping his needs will be guessed rather than expressed. The unspoken desire for deeper connection becomes another secret he carries alone. Sometimes the longing is for freedom, not necessarily to leave, but to feel that he could. To know he is choosing his life, not trapped in it. Without moments of autonomy, he fears becoming invisible even to himself. Yet admitting this desire sounds selfish, so he denies it. And in denying it, he feeds the very fear that one day he will wake up and realize he has lived without ever truly being free. These secret longings are dangerous not because they exist, but because they are denied. When acknowledged, they can lead to growth, to new conversations, to a richer marriage. But when hidden, they fester. They emerge as irritability, detachment, or a vague sense of dissatisfaction that no one can explain. Jung would say that the path to wholeness requires facing these desires, not suppressing them. Only by bringing them into consciousness can a man decide how to honor them without destroying what he values. At its core, the longing he denies is another layer of the fear married men will never admit. The fear of losing the chance to live fully. He hides his desires because he does not want to disrupt the stability he has built. Yet in hiding them, he risks living half a life, always wondering what could have been. The tragedy is not the longing itself, but the silence that surrounds it. The mask he wears every day. Every married man wears a mask. It is not a deliberate deception, nor always a conscious choice. It is the persona, the social face that Jung described as the version of ourselves we show to the world. For a married man, this mask often becomes so natural that he forgets he is wearing it. Yet behind the mask lives a different reality. Doubts, fears, and needs that remain hidden because the mask promises safety. The mask says, I am fine. I am strong. I have it all under control. It presents the image of stability and reliability. Friends admire it, family depends on it, society praises it. But while the mask protects him from vulnerability, it also creates distance from authenticity. Over time, the man risks identifying so fully with the mask that he forgets who he truly is. Jung warned that when the persona dominates, the self is suppressed and the shadow grows stronger. This mask is built gradually. At work, he learns to hide weakness. At home, he learns to show patience even when exhausted. In public, he avoids admitting fear. Piece by piece, he constructs an identity that looks solid, but inside he may feel fragile. The mask is not false in the sense of being a lie. It represents real aspects of him. But it is incomplete, and what is incomplete eventually demands attention. The price of the mask is isolation. If no one sees beyond it, then no one truly sees him. He may sit at the dinner table surrounded by his family yet feel unseen. He may laugh with friends yet feel alone. The mask performs so well that others rarely question it. The tragedy is that sometimes even his partner does not realize how much weight he carries behind the smile. The unconscious does not remain silent. The cost of wearing the mask every day emerges in subtle symptoms: fatigue that has no physical cause, sudden irritation, or the haunting sense that life feels hollow. These are messages from within, signs that the man is divided between the image he presents and the reality he hides. The more he denies this division, the heavier the mask becomes. Why does he keep wearing it? Because the mask offers protection. Admitting fear or longing feels dangerous. Society has long taught men that to be respected, they must be unshakable. Vulnerability risks judgment. Even within marriage, he may fear that revealing too much would make him seem weak or less desirable. So he keeps the mask in place even while longing to take it off. This daily performance feeds the secret fear. Deep down, he worries that if the mask ever slipped, others might not accept the man behind it. What if his wife saw his insecurities? What if his friends saw his doubts? What if his children realized he did not always know what he was doing? The fear of rejection strengthens his grip on the mask, even though the mask itself is what keeps him from intimacy. Jung believed that wholeness comes only when we integrate the parts of ourselves we try to hide. For the married man, this means daring to lower the mask and reveal his true feelings. It does not mean abandoning responsibility or strength. It means admitting he is human, that strength and weakness can coexist. Without this step, the mask may protect his reputation, but it starves his soul. Sometimes the cracks in the mask appear unexpectedly. A confession during a late-night conversation, tears that escape despite his resistance, a moment of honesty when exhaustion breaks his defenses. These glimpses reveal the truth. He is not just the image of stability. He is a man with depth, with fears, with longings. If embraced, such moments can build intimacy rather than destroy it. At its core, the mask he wears every day is both his shield and his cage. It allows him to function, but it also hides the very self that longs to be seen. And beneath it lies the secret fear he will never admit. The fear that no one will love the real man behind the performance. Until he dares to face this, the mask remains polished and convincing, while the true self waits in silence. What Jung reveals about his silent fear. When Carl Jung explored the human psyche, he often returned to one central truth. What we refuse to face in ourselves does not disappear. It grows stronger in the unconscious. For married men, the fears, doubts, and longings they hide become invisible forces that shape their lives. Jung's insights pull back the curtain on these hidden struggles, revealing why the fear is so powerful and why it is rarely spoken. Jung believed that every man wears a persona, the mask he shows to the world, but behind it lives the shadow, the part of him that contains everything he tries to deny. For the married man, the shadow is filled with unspoken fears. The fear of not being enough, of losing himself, of wasting his life in monotony, of failing to live up to silent expectations. The secret fear he carries is not a single thought, but a collection of all these hidden truths. The unconscious expresses itself through symptoms. Restlessness, dreams, irritability, even sudden desires for change. These are not random. They are messages from within, signals that the man is out of balance. When he ignores them, the fear grows. When he listens, the path to healing begins. Jung taught that the task of life is individuation, becoming whole by integrating the shadow into consciousness. For a married man, this means facing the fear he has spent years avoiding. Facing it does not mean abandoning his marriage or responsibilities. It means admitting that he is human, that his strength is real but incomplete without vulnerability. It means recognizing that his value does not come from constant comparison or silent sacrifice, but from authenticity. Only when he accepts his hidden fears can he begin to live as a complete man, rather than a role he performs. Jung also revealed that relationships mirror the unconscious. The struggles a man hides will often surface in his marriage, not because his partner causes them, but because intimacy reflects what he denies. If he feels unseen, it may be because he hides behind the mask. If he feels restless, it may be because his own desires remain unspoken. Marriage becomes not only a union with another person, but also a mirror of the inner self. The fear that he will never be fully known is really the fear that he will never allow himself to be known. The power of Jung's perspective is that it offers hope. Fear does not have to remain hidden. When brought into the light, it loses its grip. By confronting his shadow, a married man can transform the very fears that once controlled him into sources of strength. The fear of being less becomes the motivation to grow. The fear of losing himself becomes the reason to reclaim his individuality. The fear of wasting life becomes the drive to live with intention. Yet this transformation requires courage. To face the shadow is to admit that perfection is an illusion, that the mask cannot protect him forever. Jung insisted that true strength comes not from denial but from integration, from holding both light and dark together. For the married man, this means embracing the fact that he can be both dependable and fragile, both strong and uncertain. In doing so, he steps closer to wholeness. At its core, the secret fear married men will never admit is the fear of never living authentically. It is the dread that they will spend their lives meeting expectations, wearing masks and hiding longings, only to discover too late that they never truly revealed themselves. Jung's work reminds us that this fear does not have to define them. By daring to face it, they can transform silence into understanding, routine into renewal, and masks into true intimacy. Perhaps the greatest tragedy is not that men carry this fear, but that they carry it alone. And perhaps the greatest possibility is that by admitting it, they could finally be free. Jung reminds us that wholeness is not found in perfection, but in honesty. For the married man, the question is not whether he feels this fear. He does. The real question is whether he will continue to hide it, or allow it to become the key that unlocks a life lived with truth, depth, and authenticity.